give you an update, and a lot of things have happened since I was here last year. Have a dual affiliation. Texas Southern University is essentially who I'm representing today, but I've also started a little consultancy firm in the last month or so, and so I wanted to give a plug for that. Houston is faced with an incredible challenge. In fact, of the 10 proving grounds that were identified by Federal Transit Administration, the state of Texas as a whole was designated as a proving ground. And within the state, we've organized under what's called the Texas Innovation Alliance. All the major cities have teams, and Team Houston has representatives from many entities within the state, within the city. Of those that are represented, our challenge is a little bit overwhelming. In the next 30 years, Houston is going to double in size. We are building out now the last of our freeway capacity that we can build. The density has incredible focus in the center of the urban district, the urban core. We have 4 urban districts that if they were classified as central business districts, they would each be within the list of the top 15 CBDs in the country. And they are all within a 4-mile radius of each other. The traffic congestion is already serious now. It's going to be massive. Even with higher capacities that technology will bring, no matter where in the needle swings between utopia and dystopia, we are facing massive congestion because of our growth. And so mobility and last mile connections to transit systems and the provision of more high capacity transit is a major focus right now. I'll come back to that at the end. But I want to talk to you first about what we're doing in AV technology. I was principal investigator on a study that looked over 2-year time for TRB at looking at the AV implications for transit service, transit operations, and the laws and regulations that impact that. And from that, there were several key findings. One is that current campus environments are the best test beds. That's not news. A lot of people have talked about that. Research needs to focus on the key aspects of safety, policy, and regulatory adjustments, both on the technology side and on the governmental side, and that the project design and operational issues need suitable test beds that will focus, and I want to emphasize here, system-level operational challenges. There's a tendency in our group here and in the other conferences that deal with automated vehicle technology to think about the vehicle and the automation of the vehicle. But a vehicle can only serve the function I'm going to talk about if it's part of an integrated, automated system. And so that's a very important distinction. And I talk a lot to my peers and colleagues in Houston on Team Houston about the need for that. We've identified a year and a half ago the idea of the University District Circulator System. There's a cluster of universities that have 50,000 students. I'll show you where those are. There's 3 campuses side by side. Texas Southern University is where I'm associated with the Center for Transportation Training and Research. You can see it's a short distance from the Central Business District. Next to that is the University of Houston campus, and next to that is the University of Houston Research Center campus. And these 3 form what we're calling the University District. Now, the project that Team Houston has identified as their first pilot deployment is the project that we conceived at TSU, and they've embraced it. And in fact, Houston Metro and the city of Houston are bringing significant money to the table to say we want to implement. And so this early deployment phase is now what I'm talking to you about here today. The reason this fits well is Houston is very well positioned for deployment of automated technology to our busing operations, our regional busing operations. They have an HOV lane system between protected barriers that runs down the middle of freeways that's 100 miles long. They've been investing in this for decades. This photo shows an example of a freeway on the lower right. They build direct connectors from the HOV, protected HOV lane to transit centers and park and ride locations. And these transit centers and direct connectors from HOV lanes are spread all over the city in this 100-mile system. And so you can see that there's an excellent opportunity to do an early deployment of level 4 automation for large buses, probably ultimately platooning buses, that can then move directly into transit centers. They'll either board and alight passengers and go back directly in automation to the HOV lane, or they can transition to a level 3 automation if a driver needs to get on board and take the vehicle somewhere else. So our university district, for its early deployment, has changed a little bit from what I described last year. Because now that Houston Metro has embraced it and is bringing money to the table, they want to do an early deployment that will focus on first mile, last mile connections to their transit infrastructure. We are going to do a phase 1 demonstration project pilot on the TSU campus that I'll describe to you first. I'll mention here as a little bit of an interest, and I'll summarize on this at the end. There's an RFP that comes out next week for transit automated system providers to come to the table and make proposals. I'll come back to that in a minute. Then there are subsequent phases that connect off campus on low activity streets to the First Light rail station to be create an interface, and then immediately after that, the next phase will connect a little bit further away to one of these major transit centers along a high capacity transit. This is a graphic. I apologize. We're a small university. I don't have a graphics artist to help, so I make these up. But this is showing you the early phases that will be the phase 1 and 2 deployment. Phase 1, the red line down the middle of Tiger Walk in the TSU campus is where our demonstration pilot will be. Then the Metro board is pushing very hard to get that onto the streets and connect to their light rail station. So the next phase has 2 options, maybe both, maybe one or the other. But the one to the upper side, the purple line, goes to the edge of University of Houston where there's a light rail station. The other option stays on TSU controlled property and goes to a student housing area. All of these are being studied aggressively by Metro as to their alignments. We're working with them. This is the first deployment for our demonstration project. It's called Tiger Walk. It's a linear facility that stretches through the middle of our campus. This is where the initial AV demonstration pilot will occur. We are concentrating on the features that will be conducive for the expansion to first mile, last mile service. We're very interested in ADA compliance. There's a board member on Houston Metro, the Metro board, that is a paraplegic, and he's very focused on how this must be done. So there's options that have been talked about. One is a level platform where I, in some of my studies, have called precision docking. That's been demonstrated in automated vehicles. That's a possibility, and we're already designing for initial purposes wooden platforms so we can test and adjust and see what works. And then the other option is to deploy wheelchair ramps. And there are technologies that are moving in this direction. The problem you come into is that the ADA criteria and regulations from FTA thus far create maximum ramp angles for a condition that where you might be 10 inches off the ground. That would mean the ramp to comply with existing regulations might have to be 8 or 10 feet long. So we have to think about how we're going to fit in with ADA regulations or work with FTA on how they're going to adjust regulations. Other things obviously are power charging. Air conditioning is critical in Houston. We have to have air conditioning because of our heat and humidity. These are all major challenges we're going to be getting our first taste of and working with the selected supplier in the demonstration phase. Now, Tiger Walk is built along a street alignment. Wheeler Avenue was converted at the edge of campus into Tiger Walk. And so as you move down Tiger Walk, you have, and it's easy to see because conveniently because they've used different colored tiles. Down the middle is where our vehicle will run. And on the side will be where the pedestrian activity occurs. So this is a first level of complexity that we're going to be evaluating, testing, learning from as we were writing, if you will, our specifications for the ultimate deployment. Did I go the wrong way? I think I did. Okay. One of the key aspects that's critical to our technology providers, I want you to understand that, is that we have a large amount of tree canopy. For GPS purposes, that's a huge problem. And so other equipment and systems for the vehicle to know exactly where it is under conditions of especially a combination of heavy cloud cover, which we have all the time in Houston, and tree canopy is very important for us to address. Metro is doing it. Oh, I'm sorry. That's better, isn't it? Sorry about that. Metro is doing a number of alignment studies. This is our concept along Tiger Walk. Initially, with a simple single vehicle shuttle in the demonstration, you can just operate basically along one side of what will ultimately be a bidirectional system. Critically important will be the ability of the vehicle to pass other vehicles at the station platform and then run bidirectionally on the single lane in between. This is a little bit complicated. It's why it requires a systems look. Once you go beyond the demonstration phase, just to run on Tiger Walk, we're going to have a system, supervisory system that's holding vehicles, dispatching them to where they can pass at stations. So the next phase that goes off to the over to the right, to the edge of U of H campus. Let me briefly describe that. I'm going to speed up here. This is Cleburne Street. We're going to connect onto Cleburne Street. It's a low activity street. It's currently in a program to be rebuilt by the county, and so that's one of the timing aspects of when we will be able to get onto Cleburne Street in the next couple of years. But we may have some options for early phase deployment, such as over to student housing, if we're still waiting on Cleburne Street to be finished. But this is the first higher level complexity as we approach. This is Scott, a major arterial, and directly adjacent to Scott is a light rail system. And so there's a signalized intersection that we would need to go through from Cleburne Street onto U of H campus that crosses both of these high activity transportation facilities. This is a look on the U of H campus in a parking area where we would be building a station, and that's the light rail station directly adjacent. So that's phase 2. That would get us first toe in the water in mixed traffic and connection to first mile, last mile at this light rail station. Now for the longer term, we're looking at circulators system that moves throughout the large campuses. This was where analytically I was going last year, as we want to get heavily into analysis of demand response, mobility as a service in a larger campus. But now we're redirected because we have to go where the money is, and that is we're redirected in the early deployment phases to the connections to transit. So what I'll note from the color code, there is the blue circle in the map up on the right is a major transit center that Metro wants to get to in the early deployment phase once we get to the light rail station. And so this is a graphic that shows the Eastwood Transit Center. You can see down the middle of that freeway is the protected HOV lane and the direct connector that connects over into Eastwood Transit Center. So this is where, in hopefully not too many years, level 4 buses will be coming into this transit center, and our AV circulator, first mile, last mile system will come down Elgin Street underneath that maze of freeway and railroad infrastructure, and come directly into Eastwood Transit Center for transfer as a first mile, last mile. And this will be a true high capacity transit connection, first mile, last mile service. So let me close with a couple of thoughts. Why is this important? For the university, it has research tasks that focus us on the operational challenges of deployment of technology, not only in a heavy pedestrian environment, but also in mixed traffic. We'll look at key regulatory issues with FTA and other governmental entities concerning how we serve ADA, how we serve the whole public, and then finally we'll look at first mile, last mile connectivity to Houston Metro for the student populations. Now going beyond, this is why it's so important. Remember, we're going to double in size. We'll pass Chicago.